Greetings, magical mavens! It's Afira here, a witch of hedge, hearth, and harvest. If you're new to my little neck of the woods, I share charming, aesthetic footage of all my magical crafts and projects that I get up to in nature and in my cozy little witch's cottage. I started this channel shortly after I moved from a cramped apartment building in a busy city to a smaller, more rural town to pursue my dream of living my best green witchy life. In the first video from my new vlog series, I caught you up on my first 6 months in my new home, specifically focusing on the process of moving in, getting unpacked, decorating, and home improvements. In this video, I'll be catching you up on that same 6 months from the Winter Solstice to the Summer Solstice, but primarily focusing on the magical mischief I've gotten up to in the kitchen. Since foraging in nature is a big part of my path, I've also included trips into the forests and fields to gather herbs and edible plants, and show you how I preserved them in my pantry or apothecary. This is going to be a nice, long, relaxing, and cozy adventure. Longer than any video I have ever posted on my other channel. So I've separated it into little chapters by month from January through June. You may even wish to watch it in parts when you have time to relax and enjoy the ASMR scenes and enchanting music. Since there are so many projects to share, I didn't have enough room in the video to go into detail on everything that I'm doing. And in fact, half of the stuff I get up to in this video is purely experimental as I tried new things and learned to hone my recipes and skills along the way. So there will be talking in some scenes, as well as lots of ASMR sequences and sections with music, but no talking. So if there are any projects touched upon in this video that you feel inspired by and would like to learn more about, please leave a comment letting me know. So without further ado, I invite you to grab a cozy cup of your favorite witch's brew and let's make some magic. I hope you're enjoying this relaxing ASMR video so far. I just wanted to chime in here and talk to you about this squash. So if you've been following my other channel, you know that for several years now I've had a tradition of acquiring a hardy winter squash around the autumn equinox and challenging myself to keep it safe and fresh inside for an entire 6 months all the way through to the spring equinox. And on the spring equinox, I like to cut it open, harvest the seeds to plant new squashes, and have a feast. And stay tuned for the gardening episode, which will be coming out next, to see how it does. Alright friends, it's time for me to chime in and talk a little bit about this species of wild garlic known in the US as ramps. When I first discovered the concept of wild alliums, it was on British YouTube channels, where I saw people walking through what looked like a mythical paradise of endless forest floors, absolutely covered in these soft light green leaves. It seemed like folks waited all year to get to harvest these special treats, and they collected abundant harvests of it to enjoy with spring meals. When I started foraging last year, I was happy to discover that there were wild alliums all over some of my local parks, but they were these sort of strong-flavored, grass-textured things that definitely don't make a very smooth pesto, at least not with an old blender. And I wondered if I would ever find that coveted, wide, tender-leafed version that I had heard about online. And this year, I finally found it. When I happened upon these patches, my intuition told me that obviously I should harvest responsibly. I never harvest more than half of a plant, preferably less, and since these seemed to only have 2 leaves each, I cut 1 leaf per plant, and I left quite a few totally untouched. I also carefully dug up a few bulbs to propagate in my garden and strengthen the overall population in my area. Now, fast forward to a few weeks later, when I was, again, watching a British YouTube channel where someone was harvesting wild garlic. They mentioned in passing that, again, it was necessary to only harvest 1 leaf per plant, which I had never heard anyone say that before, actually. And they even mentioned the word illegal. So I had to look it up. Come to find out that even in the UK, where these ramps grow much more abundantly, there are still a lot of rules and guidelines around harvesting them, and even more so here in the US, where it's much less prevalent. Apparently, it's endangered due to people over-harvesting, and it takes a whopping 5 to 7 years for them to reproduce. I learned that it was straight up illegal to harvest them at all in some places, and here it seems that the guideline is exactly as my instinct prescribed. Harvest 1 leaf per plant, try to propagate a few bulbs without disturbing nearby bulbs, and leave some plants totally untouched. Boy, was I relieved to know that I had followed good foraging practices and avoided committing a crime, even without knowing how important this species is. This was also a lesson in remembering to do a little bit of research before picking things. Now that I've tried ramps, I will agree they are absolutely delicious, but honestly, the invasive species of wild onions and garlic that I have in my area taste just as good and create just as good of a pesto with the right tools and know-how. So while I'm obviously hoping that these few bulbs will come back in my yard next year, I'm happy knowing all of these lessons and that I don't need to obsess over finding ramps if that's not ideal. I just wanted to do a quick foraging haul. That sounds so wrong. All of this here was from my very own yard, which absolutely thrills me. This is obviously some dandelion that I'm just gonna actually be stashing in my freezer because I realized that dandelion, while being extremely good for you, also just doubles as backup greens. And I often am somebody that doesn't have greens on hand because I feel like every time that I buy greens from the grocery store to eat in salad, I'm not a huge salad person, so they usually end up sitting there and they're not very good if you freeze them. These, on the other hand, are very good if you freeze them. They freeze really well. They're heartier, they're probably better for you, and they're free. So I discovered when I made my dandelion pie the other day that I would happily make that all the time. And these preserve well, so I'm just gonna start collecting these. As far as more salad type greens that I would actually eat in a salad, because honestly, I think I prefer those cooked. These are chickweed, and I've never really eaten chickweed before. I've always known that there was something common called chickweed that is edible, but this is kind of my first time really identifying it and knowing what it is. I have tasted a piece of it, and I think this is a really good salad green because it doesn't have a strong flavor at all. It's nice and soft and like just generally easy to eat. Unlike dandelion leaves. So unlike the heads, which I love the heads of the dandelions, I don't know, guys. There's like really expensive dandelion leaves at the gourmet grocery store, and there's people on the internet talking about how much they love to eat dandelion greens. I don't get it. Like, I'm sorry, but I don't get it. It's extremely, extremely bitter, even like the young leaves that I've noticed. However, I've realized that I do absolutely love the roasted root tea, which is considered a coffee substitute. I don't think if you were like a hardcore coffee drinker, you would be fooled by it because it doesn't taste exactly the same by any means, but it's just another option of like one of those warm, cozy drinks that's like toasty and roasty and that you can have with cream. And if you don't want coffee because of all of its side effects, it is a really nice thing to have. It kind of hits a similar spot if you're not like too obsessed with the actual flavor of coffee. This is a dock leaf, which I have never really eaten before either, but I did learn in my studies last year that dock is a good salad green. I have tasted a piece of it. It doesn't have as neutral of a flavor as the chickweed. Honestly, I feel like it is a little bit bitter though. I would probably be a lot more likely to again cook this up into something as opposed to eating it raw, but I would more happily eat this raw than I would the dandelion leaf. Now these are clover leaves, and oh my gosh, I would say out of the salady ones that I would eat as salad, this one is my favorite. It tastes very mild, but it kind of reminds me of if you've ever eaten the leaves of the pea. It's like pea shoots basically. That is really good. I would definitely eat that in a salad on those rare occasions when I'm in the mood for a cold salad. Now this one I am a lot more familiar with. This is ground ivy, aka creeping Charlie. I think I first identified this almost 10 years ago now, the last time that I was living in a house that had a proper yard, and this was all over that place. So this one has a much more distinct flavor than really any of these besides maybe the dandelion greens. It kind of has like a pepperiness. This is in the mint family, so it has that very like strong aromaticness that mint tends to have, but it doesn't actually taste like mint. I don't even want to call it peppery. It's like not really bitter, but it's definitely not really sweet. But then again, the flowers are quite sweet. Like the flowers, I would definitely like put on cupcakes or something like that to be cute because they do have a sort of a sweet taste. These ones I do think would be good in a salad, but I don't think they would be the primary thing because they do have such a sort of overpowering taste. It's not so strong that it's like, ooh, I don't want that in my mouth like I do with the dandelion. It's just that it has a very noticeable flavor. So this would be really nice to be an addition to a green pie, as I guess I'm calling them, kind of like my nettle pie that we just looked at. One thing that I've noticed overall in my experimentation is that most of the edible plants that you'll find outside have a little bit more of a stronger or bitter flavor than the types of greens we're used to growing intentionally to eat and buying from the grocery store. Some of them I think I like a little bit better, like nettle I like better than spinach. But then there are things like dandelion that you have to realize it does have kind of a medicinal flavor, more so than like a food flavor. But one thing that I definitely have noticed is that when you cook them down, it very much eliminates a lot of any unfamiliar flavors. So for example, even when I did try the greens of the dandelion, I didn't love it. I'm not going to pretend like I loved it, but I much preferred the sauteed version with salt and pepper than I did just the raw one, maybe with a little bit of salad dressing, for example. I also noticed when I made the fritter with the dandelions, even just these green parts of the heads can be a little bit bitter. So I noticed that when I made it with sourdough starter, the bitterness of the dough actually worked really well and kind of masked the bitterness of the flour greens. But when I baked it into a pie, you couldn't taste the bitterness whatsoever. It kind of mushed in with all the rest of the flavors and was just very similar to a spinach pie. Now, I did also discover that I have goldenrod, and I'm obsessed with goldenrod mainly because last year being my big learning to forage year, I was already looking forward to foraging this because I learned about it shortly after it went out of season the previous year, and I realized that the area that I now live in is very much covered in it. So I'm happy to see that there is some in my yard as well. I did do a little bit of magic and medicinal stuff with this last year on the channel, but we're definitely going to be doing more because there's gonna be more, trust me. I think what I'm going to do with these, I mean, they do have a very, very noticeable goldenrod flavor. If you've ever had goldenrod tea, it very much tastes like that. So I could absolutely save it for like a little medicinal addition to any herbal tea that I might want to make. But they also don't taste so weird or so strongly that, again, they couldn't be added to a salad or a saute or a pie or anything like that as well. Again, I just probably wouldn't use primarily these because, like the ground ivy, it doesn't taste bad at all. It tastes pretty good, but it is very noticeable, and I can feel like if you're not used to that slightly medicinal flavor of foraged greens, you're probably going to want to put the majority of what you're making as something that ends up with a more familiar flavor, like this that doesn't really taste like anything. These, once they're cooked, don't really taste like anything. And then you could even mix it in with like your grocery store spinach or whatever. I bet this is a really good substitute for anything like spinach because it doesn't have a strong flavor at all. It almost, like I said, just has a little bit of a pea green flavor, which I like. Now, while we're here, I figured I would also just talk a little bit about what I had in my fridge. So here are the stems of the nettle that I foraged at my local park yesterday to make the pie. I think I'm gonna actually try making nettle beer out of this because I've learned that there's nettle beer and it's like some ancient technique. So I totally want to try that. And it pretty much just starts with you making, I think it's called a decoction, when you basically make a tea, but instead of pouring the hot water over it and letting it steep, you actually boil it for a while. I believe that's the word, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm gonna make a decoction out of that and then I'm just gonna ferment it essentially. Now I also have my long-awaited, I'm calling them European style garlic, because what I'm used to finding in my neck of the woods is the sort of grassy looking ones, the like onion chives and the garlic sort of flavored chives that just look like grass. They have much more of a grass texture as well. So for example, before I got adequate grinding tools for my kitchen, I was trying to use an old blender and an old food processor, and I was just ending up with a pesto that had the texture of like slightly digested herbivore poop, and it was kind of not very appetizing to look at and to eat with that texture, even though it was actually delicious. This one, I did use my new bullet blender for this, but I have a feeling that you could blend this up in any tool, even an old crappy blender, and it would blend very nicely. This is very, very smooth and soft, very easy to chew. and it's freaking delicious. I will say that it doesn't have as strong of a flavor as the other ones that I have tried. For example, when I made the nettle pie, this was the only allium that I included in the recipe, and I almost wish that I would have put more like actual onions or garlic, or even just some of the other more grassy ones that I harvested, because this doesn't have a strong flavor. This would be a delicious thing to include in a salad. Any salad probably, but I'm imagining it in like an Italian type salad, because it basically has a garlic flavor without being strong at all. And it's really good. Like this, I was so excited to find this, and I did, of course, propagate it, and I'm hoping that it will grow here in my new garden. If I had enough of this, which I don't right now, I would absolutely make an entire pie out of this in place of spinach, and just like not add any other alliums into it, and have it just literally be a wild garlic pie. Like that would be absolutely delicious. So I think just for funsies, I am gonna go ahead and just make a little salad out of everything that I have here. And that'll just be a little magical celebration of the abundance of the nature that is now surrounding me. Even though I'm not the biggest salad person, I feel like I'm motivated to eat the salad because I'm just so excited about everything that I have been able to forage here. And I know that that is part of the magic of the kitchen and of nature harvesting, is that the energy of the plants can call you to it more so than just like the craving of a flavor that we've become accustomed to using as our sort of way of going about eating, I guess. I'm not someone that normally craves cold salad in the form that you kind of get at the grocery store, but just the idea that all of this is way more potent, way more healthy, way more magical, connects me to the land I'm on, and is just me getting to try something new and exciting. I do feel motivated to eat it. I am not going to include the greens of this. This just happened to come up when I was digging a spot for the St. John's wort that I was so excited to find. That looks really nice. I think just all the beautiful green colors and textures, and then the pop of purple, guys. You know, I'm not as purple as I used to be back in my like Instagram days, but I do love the color purple, and now I get to eat it. For the dandelion heads, I don't really like this piece right here, so I think I'm just gonna, yeah, just kind of go like that. And it just looks a little bit prettier that way, actually. It's just like floral confetti. And all of this, I'm just gonna add to my broth for a little special extra nutritious greens and something from the land. So here we are, my little park and backyard dinner. This salad is actually really good. I think I chose well, choosing to put just the dandelion buds and not any of the bitter greens because I don't like them. I think everything else that I chose in here was absolutely perfect. And something I'm recalling is that when I do like a green salad, I like it to be, well, in the past I've liked it to be some, you know, arugula, spinach, that sort of thing. But what really got me excited for salads when I was in the habit of eating them was like more herbs, throwing more like garden herbs and things in there. And this is kind of the vibe. It just tastes way more interesting than your basic salad. I do think in the future I would throw in maybe a little bit of mint or maybe even a little sage or something like that, just to give it a little bit more familiar flavors. But this time I just wanted to try it purely with just plants from the backyard and a little bit from the park. And I just threw some of my fire cider on there as my dressing, at least the vinegar part of my dressing, and then I also drizzled it with some olive oil. This is really good. So today I needed a particular jar that happened to have fire cider brewing in it, and just on a logical standpoint, I was like, ugh, I wonder if it would be a decent time to strain off that fire cider so I can use this jar. And I didn't really put two and two together, but I was like, I feel like it's been almost a month, so I'm sure that's fine. And then of course, I was doing a little bit of gardening as the sun was setting, and I was like, duh. It's new moon time, which means it has been a full moon cycle. I don't always do things in alignment with the moon cycle, but when I'm brewing something and a new moon is coming up and I don't for some reason desperately just need to get it started immediately, I do like to start things on the new moon. And a lot of home brews and things like that take about 30 days. So not only is it a little bit magical where I can put intention into it and imagine that along with the moon growing, it too is growing, but it's also just very practical. Some practical magic for you. The moon cycle is 28 days, and if you're someone that tends to think about and plan around the moon more than like logical muggle time, sometimes it's just practical to work with that, and that's what I do. So I'm gonna go and strain off this fire cider. Also, on that note, fire cider, most people think of it as something that you do during cold and flu season. In my magical and just personal practice, I don't like to think of there being a cold and flu season in my life. I'm a very healthy person. I almost never get sick. In fact, the last time I got sick, it was when I got COVID back in 21. And oh my gosh, I sound so old saying that, but I don't get sick. And part of the reason why I'm saying it that way is not to brag of like, oh, I don't get sick, but part of that is because that is an affirmation for me that is so deeply rooted at this point that I can easily just say it out loud without feeling like it's a lie. You know what I mean? Sometimes we're saying affirmations and it kind of feels like we're trying to force it or trying to convince ourselves. But that is one of those things, like I am a very healthy person and I feel like I very successfully ingrained that into myself. That being said though, part of the reason I am such a healthy person is because I have healthy habits all the time, as opposed to trying to do preventative practices where I'm thinking about the problem. I like to just have healthy practices where I'm thinking about the solution. The solution is I'm a healthy person, and one of the practices is that it's okay to do things like fire cider year round. I think especially after the whole COVID situation, I realized, you know what, it's probably a good idea to just have some kind of herbal immune booster in your life as part of your lifestyle. So this year in particular, I'm making a habit of taking a little sip of fire cider every day, even though it's no longer cold and flu season, which, can we not call it that? Can we just call it winter and say, let's use healthy habits for winter? That's what I'm advocating for. Anyway, gonna get back to that. So seeing as this is June, it might seem a little bit late to be making May wine, but let's just say that life has been very busy lately, hence kind of the reason why you're seeing all of this now instead of closer to the time when it even happened, but I digress. Ever since last year when I happened upon sweet woodruff growing on the floor of a local forest, I have been dying to try a more traditional version of the concept of May wine. I don't have time to go fully into detail about the whole magical story of sweet woodruff and May wine in this video, but I'll try and remember to link you to a video where I talked about it more. Last fall, when I found sweet woodruff, I tinctured the small amount that I was able to harvest, and I have been waiting for spring so that I could try out this recipe. And I'm so glad I did. I had no idea what to expect with this, but it's actually really good. It turns out sweet woodruff has a similar taste to, I would almost say, a cross between vanilla and honey and chamomile. And what's awesome about making tinctures and flavor extracts with alcohol is that they have the ability to last pretty much indefinitely. So even though I discovered the sweet woodruff growing fresh in late fall, and I wanted to try this recipe in the spring or summertime, I was able to do that by tincturing it. If tincturing is something that you're interested in, I have been doing a ton of tincturing, more towards the end of summer this year, so it didn't make it into this video, but definitely make sure that you're subscribed and hit the bell button so that you will know when I finally put that video out. Well, magical mavens, that just about covers all the shenanigans I got up to in the kitchen between the winter solstice and the summer solstice. In the final video of the 6-month catch-up series, I'll finally be sharing with you everything that's been going on in my backyard gardening adventures. In the meantime, if you haven't already, I invite you to subscribe and hit the bell button so you'll be notified when it comes out. And if you missed it, be sure to check out my first video where I showed you how I transformed my new rental space into a charming witch's cottage and an epic 6-month home makeover. So I'll see you there. And thank you so much for coming along on this adventure with me. Blessed be.